He was a Nazi officer. She was Jewish. Their love meant death. Yet this story, buried under decades of silence and dust, survived long enough to reach us today. And as you listen, I ask you to open your mind, your heart, and imagine a time when the world was broken in half, when every choice was dangerous, and when love, fragile, forbidden, nearly impossible, still found a way to exist. This is a romantic history of World War II, unlike the ones taught in books. It's not about generals, battles, or dates carved into stone. It's about two souls who were never meant to meet, but did. Two lives destined to collide in the worst place, at the worst moment. Yet somehow that collision gave birth to something beautiful. Picture Poland, winter of 1942. Snowflakes drift through the air like tiny ghosts, landing softly on the shoulders of soldiers marching through the frozen streets of Krakow. Among them is Wilhelm Hartmann, a 27-year-old Nazi officer. His posture is sharp, his uniform immaculate, his eyes cold from discipline and duty. Since childhood, he'd been trained to believe in loyalty, power, and the promise of a glorious future for the Reich. Feelings were weakness, compassion was forbidden, and questioning orders was unthinkable. To him, back then, the world was simple. Us and them, the conquerors and the conquered. Right and wrong, dictated by propaganda. But war has a strange way of rewriting the hearts of men. Wilhelm was assigned to oversee a warehouse seized by the Germans, where Jewish civilians were forced to work cataloging confiscated belongings. Books, letters, photo albums, jewelry, fragments of lives torn apart. Every box held a story no one would ever hear again. And among those stories stood Hannah Weiss. She was 22, a fragile figure among crates and cold air, her hair tied back with a piece of worn cloth. Her eyes, brown, deep, filled with fear and something else, something like fading hope, moved silently over the objects she handled. She avoided eye contact with soldiers. She moved carefully, breathing as if each breath could be punished. But Wilhelm saw her, first for a second, then longer. Too long. Long enough for something inside him to shift. He noticed her hands trembling as she held a book. He noticed she hid a small photograph in her apron pocket, touching it like a secret treasure. He noticed her lips moving quietly while she read titles in English, as if whispering to ghosts or praying to memories. It bothered him, not with anger, but with curiosity. Why did she seem different from the others? Why did he care? Days passed, then weeks. The officer, who once walked through the warehouse without seeing faces, began searching for one in particular. He slowed his steps near her table. He pretended to inspect her work, just to hear her voice. He wasn't supposed to feel, yet he did. One afternoon, he finally spoke. "What is that book you keep near you?" he asked, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. Hannah hesitated. Speaking to an officer was dangerous. Any wrong word could be her last. But something in his tone, perhaps softer, less brutal than she'd expected, encouraged her. "It's Wuthering Heights," she whispered in English. "A romance. About love that shouldn't exist. A story of impossible love." How fitting. Wilhelm didn't smile. He couldn't, not openly. But something inside him warmed like fire in winter. He knew the book. He had read parts of it before the war, in a different life. A life that now seemed lost. A few nights later, I want to pause this moment briefly. If you are feeling the weight of this story, if you want to hear the rest, if your heart is already asking what will become of them, please take a second now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people discover these stories and ensures you never miss the next chapter in this romantic history of World War II. Thank you. Now let's continue. Their conversations became more frequent. Subtle at first, hidden beneath routine. He would pass by, slower each day. Sometimes he left an extra piece of bread on her table. Once, a small pencil so she could write. Small gestures, but to a starving prisoner, they meant everything. She began to trust him, carefully, like someone touching a wound. Over quiet moments, she revealed pieces of her life. She loved literature, dreamed of writing, had 2 brothers taken away to labor camps. She didn't know if they were alive. Wilhelm listened. Each confession chipped away at the walls built inside him. For the first time, he saw not an enemy, but a woman. Frightened, brilliant, human. And with that realization came something far more dangerous. Empathy. One morning, Hannah wasn't there. Wilhelm felt a chill of panic he didn't understand. He asked another guard. The answer was short, careless. Some were sent to the train last night. The train. Even he, a loyal officer, had begun to grasp what the trains meant. His blood ran cold. Without thinking, he searched the transfer records. Her name was missing. Relief swept over him. She was still in the facility, sick, with a fever, moved to the infirmary. He went to see her. She lay weak beneath thin blankets, breathing shallowly. When she opened her eyes and met his, something unspoken passed between them. Relief, disbelief, something like longing. He sat beside her, removed his gloves, and for the first time touched her hand. Her skin was cold like winter, yet that touch burned through him. A forbidden fire. They both knew what it meant. This was no longer curiosity. It was something deeper, dangerous, alive. He promised quietly that he would protect her. Even he didn't know how. But war does not forgive softness. Love in a place like that was a crime punishable by death. For him, for her, every stolen glance could be betrayal. Every whispered word could be the last. And yet, neither stepped back. Not anymore. Because once love begins, even in the shadows of war, it refuses to die easily. This was only the beginning. The days that followed felt different. Wilhelm walked through the warehouse as he always did, but now every sound echoed louder. Every pair of watching eyes felt heavier. He could feel suspicion in the air, like frost crawling under his uniform. A Nazi officer showing unusual attention to a Jewish worker was not just odd, it was dangerous. He knew it. Hannah knew it. Still, they could not undo what had begun inside them. When she returned from the infirmary, weaker but alive, their stolen moments became even more precious. He brought her a coat, nothing extravagant, just thick enough to stop the cold from biting her bones. He could have been punished severely for this small act of humanity, but he handed it to her anyway, in a discreet corner of the warehouse. She looked at him as if he had given her the world. "You should not," she whispered. "If they see, if anyone talks," he nodded. He understood. But he also understood something else. Life was more than orders, more than uniforms, more than fear. It was made of choices, tiny ones at first, then larger ones that demanded courage. He was still learning this. She, who had lost almost everything, had learned long ago. One evening, the world outside was buried in snow and silence when Wilhelm found Hannah alone, closing boxes at the end of her shift. The other prisoners had already been escorted out. A lamp flickered above her, casting soft light over her pale hands. He approached slowly, heart pounding like a rebellion inside his chest. When she looked up, their eyes met with an honesty neither could hide anymore. "I shouldn't be here," he said, voice low, almost trembling. "No," she replied gently. "But you are." A single moment of quiet stretched between them, fragile yet powerful. Then Hannah reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her treasured photograph, a faded picture of her family before the war. Her parents smiling, her two brothers standing tall, all alive then, all gone now, or so she feared. Wilhelm held the picture carefully, as if it might crumble. Behind the smiles, he saw an entire world stolen, a world his uniform represented. "Do you hate me?" he asked. She hesitated. The question pierced deeper than she expected. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "I hate what the Nazis have done. I hate what has been taken. But you are not only your uniform." For a man raised to believe loyalty was everything, her words were like a key turning in a locked door. Something opened, something he couldn't close anymore. He handed the photograph back, but his fingers lingered against hers. A spark, a promise neither spoke aloud, yet both felt burning. But love does not grow without risk. Suspicions soon began to stir. A sergeant, older, colder, noticed Wilhelm's visits to the warehouse were longer than necessary. He observed the officer's eyes always searching for one face among many, and he remembered the rules too well. One morning, Wilhelm was summoned to an inspection round earlier than usual. When he returned, he found the warehouse tense, quieter than normal. Hannah was pale, her eyes red as though she'd been crying. Near her table stood the sergeant, flipping through the book she loved, Wuthering Heights. His fingers paused on the handwritten note inside the cover, written in her delicate script. Something private, something sentimental. Wilhelm's heart froze. The sergeant looked up with a smirk that sent dread through him. "Interesting," he said. "You take special interest in this one." Wilhelm forced calm into his voice. "She handles books well, that's all." The sergeant laughed dryly. Books or the girl? A second stretched like an eternity. Soldiers nearby watched. Hannah stared at the floor, hands shaking. One wrong word could destroy them both. Wilhelm stepped forward, his authority barely masking the fear beneath. "Your observation is unnecessary. Return to your duties." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. He didn't push further. Not yet. But something dark glimmered there. A silent threat that would not disappear. Wilhelm knew then that their secret was no longer safe. That night, Wilhelm couldn't sleep. His thoughts tormented him. He imagined Hannah being pulled away, loaded onto a truck or train in the darkness, and disappearing forever. The idea hollowed him out. He paced his room, conflicted between sworn duty and an emotion he could no longer deny. Finally, he made a decision. A decision so reckless that, once chosen, there would be no turning back. He would try to save her. The next evening, when the guards changed shifts and the warehouse dimmed into half-light, Wilhelm approached Hannah. His voice was firm, but his eyes were soft, desperate. "You cannot stay here," he whispered. "The sergeant suspects something. If he reports you, if he reports us," she understood. She knew the cost. A Jewish woman caught with a Nazi officer would be executed or sent to camps worse than death. He could face court-martial, execution. They were both standing at the edge of two fates, one ruled by fear, the other by love. "But where would I go?" she asked, voice breaking. "There is nowhere safe for me." Wilhelm took her hands, something he never would have dared weeks earlier. The contact felt like fire and winter at once. He inhaled deeply. "I know a place outside the city, an old house from my family, abandoned for years. If I can get you papers, if I can take you there, perhaps we have a chance. A chance, a fragile dream built from courage instead of despair." Hannah stared into his eyes for a long moment, searching, questioning, hoping. Finally she nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. Not a tear of fear, but of something brighter, something alive. "If we run," she whispered. "We run together." Wilhelm felt his throat tighten. They were no longer officer and prisoner. They were two souls choosing each other against the world. The war outside still raged, louder every day. But for them, in that silent corner of the warehouse, time paused long enough to make a promise. They would try, no matter the risk. But the universe does not allow love to escape easily from war. The more they planned, the more danger coiled around them. Papers would need forging. Routes would require timing. One mistake, one glance from the wrong person, and everything would collapse. Still, they moved forward, because love, even forbidden love, does not ask permission to exist, and so begins their escape. Not just from the warehouse, but from the chains of a world determined to tear them apart. Their story is about to grow darker, braver, and infinitely more fragile. And what happens next will test the limits of the human heart. They had only nights and whispers to build their escape. Wilhelm studied guard routines, memorized schedules, and secured forged documents through risky favors. Favors that could cost him his life if anyone traced them back. Hannah practiced speaking German fluently, and Wilhelm taught her how to walk confidently, as if she were someone the soldiers would never question. They both understood one truth: fear must never show on the surface. But war has a way of listening through walls. One evening, as snow drifted silent outside, Wilhelm arrived at the warehouse later than usual. His heart thudded with urgency. Tonight was the night they would attempt escape. The forged papers were hidden beneath his uniform, and his pistol strapped tighter than ever. He looked for Hannah, ready to signal her. But Hannah wasn't at her table. Instead, she stood at the center of the room under harsh lamplight, surrounded by armed guards, and next to her, the sergeant. His smug expression sent cold dread into Wilhelm's stomach. Time slowed. Every sound sharpened. Wilhelm's pulse thundered in his ears. "So," the sergeant said softly, eyes glinting, "our officer cares for a Jew." Hannah's hands were bound, her face pale. Yet she looked at Wilhelm with calm acceptance, as if she had known this moment might come. Maybe love always carries the shadow of loss. Wilhelm stepped forward, voice steady but trembling underneath. "Release her. She has done nothing." The sergeant laughed. "On the contrary, she has corrupted you, a betrayal of the Reich, and betrayal demands example." Then he gave the command, "Take her." 2 guards pulled Hannah toward the exit, toward a truck waiting outside. Every instinct in Wilhelm ignited like fire. He moved without thinking, drawing his pistol, pointing it at the sergeant. Gasps filled the room. A Jewish woman looked up from a crate and dropped her hands over her mouth. Even the air trembled. "Let her go," Wilhelm said, voice low but fierce. "Now!" For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. The sergeant stared, stunned by the officer who dared raise a gun against his own. Then a wicked smile curved across his face. "You're finished, Hartmann." He reached for his weapon, but Wilhelm fired first. The gunshot cracked like thunder, echoing through wood and winter. The sergeant fell. Silence followed, heavy and unreal. Guards stepped back, shocked by what they'd witnessed. The officer they saluted yesterday had just shot one of their own, all for a Jewish woman. There was no turning back now. "Hannah, run!" Wilhelm shouted. He rushed to her, cutting the rope around her wrists with his knife. She stumbled, tears flooding her eyes. No time for words. No time for fear. Only movement. They ran through the back exit, into the snow, into the night like hunted ghosts. Alarms began to ring within minutes. Soldiers shouting, dogs barking. The chase had begun. The world blurred into cold wind and pounding footsteps. Wilhelm led her through alleys and trees, toward the forest where a stolen car waited, an old black Opel he'd prepared days earlier. They dove inside, breathless, shaking. Wilhelm turned the key. The engine roared. As they sped down the icy road, Hannah looked at him, voice breaking into a whisper. "You came for me." "I would cross hell for you," he replied, eyes fixed on the road. Behind them, sirens wailed. Hours passed as night swallowed the world. They crossed frozen fields, bridges guarded by half-asleep soldiers, back roads covered in snow. Every mile felt stolen from death itself. When dawn came, pale and quiet, they reached the abandoned house Wilhelm remembered. Old, crumbling, hidden by forest. Safe for now. Inside, it smelled of dust and forgotten summers. Wilhelm lit a fire. Hannah wrapped herself in blankets and looked around with wonder, as if she were seeing a future she never thought possible. For a moment, a fragile, breathtaking moment, they felt free. That night, they made tea from herbs found in the pantry and sat on the floor near the fire. Flames flickered across their faces, warm against the cold world outside. Hannah told him about her childhood. He spoke of her city's bookshop where she used to spend afternoons reading. Wilhelm listened as if every word were a treasure. She spoke about her dreams, becoming a writer, living near the sea, feeling sun instead of fear. And he shared something he had never confessed aloud, that he no longer believed in the war, or the uniform, or the lies he'd grown up with. That she had shown him humanity again. Their hands touched. And slowly, they leaned forward. One breath, one heartbeat, one kiss, delicate at first, then deeper, desperate, filled with everything they had never been allowed to feel. Two souls finally finding each other in a world determined to keep them apart. For a week they hid in that house, loving in whispers, living in stolen peace. They watched snowfall through broken windows, shared pieces of bread and memory, turning fear into fragile hope. For the first time in years, Hannah laughed, quietly, but real. And Wilhelm smiled like a man remembering he had a heart. But peace cannot last in war. One morning, distant engines hummed through the trees. Trucks, soldiers. The sergeant hadn't died. He lived, and he wanted revenge. They had been found. Wilhelm's face went pale. "We must go, now." They ran into the forest, snow up to their knees, gunshots cracking behind them. Hannah slipped. Wilhelm pulled her up, breath visible in frantic clouds. Each step felt heavier than the last. The world blurred into white and fear. Then a shot tore through the air. Wilhelm staggered. Hannah screamed. Blood bloomed across his coat. Still, he kept running, holding her hand with everything he had left. They reached the river, freezing, rushing, the only escape. "Hannah," he gasped, voice fading. "You must cross. You must live." "No," she cried, holding him tight. We crossed together. Soldiers closed in. Wilhelm cupped her face, eyes full of love deeper than the war surrounding them. "If I fall," he whispered, "promise me you'll keep telling our story. Do not let it die here." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She kissed him, long, trembling, filled with the weight of 1,000 unspoken tomorrows. Then, with strength born of love and desperation, she helped him into the icy river. Gunshots thundered behind them. Water swallowed their bodies. They fought the current together, each stroke a prayer. Cold tore at their skin. Darkness clawed at their lungs. But they held on. And then, silence. When morning came, villagers on the far bank found a young woman collapsed near the shore, frozen but alive, clutching the hand of a wounded soldier who no longer breathed. Her cries echoed across the water. A love story ending where it never should have begun. She survived. He did not. Years later, she wrote their story in a worn notebook, the romantic history of World War II that we speak today. She kept Wilhelm alive through ink and memory, saying love had saved her even when the world tried to destroy them. She never remarried. She visited his grave every winter until old age carried her gently away. 2 enemies, 2 hearts, 1 impossible love. And though war stole their tomorrow, it could not erase what they had in their fragile, stolen moments. Love, even forbidden, even doomed, leaves a mark time cannot erase. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to support this channel and to hear more forgotten tales like this. Your support keeps these memories alive, so they are never lost to history. Love survived because you listened.